Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our podcast. My name is Hannah.
And I'm Rachel.
And this is the You Talkin' to Me podcast. Today, first and foremost, we need to let you know that this is a trigger warning for many different areas of topics, including suicide,
sexual assault,
what else?
mental health, probably drug abuse. I'm not sure everything that we'll talk about, but there will be any and all things. So if you are not in a safe space to listen to this, if you saw the thumbnail, I hope, if you know what this show is about and like the types of things that they talk about, and that is just something you can't handle, please do not watch this. We're not going to be making fun of it or talking lightly about anything, but it still is all just going to be included in our review.
So now, we didn't say what the title is, but it's 13 Reasons Why. And I'm going to give you a recap of the first episode. 13 Reasons Why is a series on Netflix based off of the book with the same title. The first episode introduces you to Hannah Baker, who took her life. Hannah recorded on 13 cassette tapes why she ended her life. We watch as Clay receives them and how he reacts to knowing he was one of the reasons Hannah ended her life. The first tape talks about Justin Foley and what he did to Hannah after their first kiss. To find out more of the story, you need to watch the rest of the series.
I will also, this is also a warning, spoiler, I'm probably going to tell you exactly all of the 13 reasons in both of the book and the show. We're not going to delve too much into all the other episodes, but I will be talking just about the differences in general from the book and the show. So I, at one point, did watch all of the episodes. I rewatched the first 4 episodes just recently. Hannah watched the first episode recently. They also have seen the whole series, but we're mostly just going to talk about the first episode plus the book and then the 13.
Not the whole series. I've seen the first season.
Yeah, that's what we mean. My bad. After you see, you honestly don't need to watch it, but you don't need to, especially don't watch past the first season because it gets crazy. But if you want a podcast about the stupid turns this show takes, I'm willing to do it again for you. I will do that for you guys. All
Let
right.
us know. It might be a very hot take on an episode. If you like one we're really opinionated, I feel like that'd probably happen if we watch the whole series on this one.
I honestly kind of want Hannah to watch the whole series because if I think it's ridiculous, like I'm just waiting to see your reaction. Because like it still talks about very serious topics, but like some of the places this show goes, I'm just like, the F is going on. But without further ado, I shall start delving in. I will tell you just briefly my thoughts of the book.
For y'all that don't know, Rachel's read it. I have not.
Okay, so briefly, the book's not good. Those are my thoughts. All right, have a good day. Just kidding. Okay, here's why I don't like the book. One, it's all from Clay's perspective, which is fine. But like right away, when Clay gets the tapes and he like listens to them, the way it's written is like so stupid because it's like, I wish I had the book. I had like rented it from the library and I don't have it again with me. I had to return it. But it's like, this is Hannah Baker live in stereo or whatever she says. And all of a sudden it'll say that and then it'll be Clay being like, what? And then it'll like say more about what Hannah said. And then it'll be like, what's going on? Huh? And I'm like, this is so stupid. Like, one, you're breaking up the tape. I just care about the tape. I don't care about Clay's reaction right now. Just play a good section of it. And then you can have him pause it and be like, no, what am I listening to? This can't possibly be Hannah, whatever. So it was so stupid, him trying to get into Clay's head. And it was really, really freaking dumb. Also, here's another thing. I don't want to say this as if it's like lightly or anything, that like these aren't valid like things that could make Hannah Baker very upset and feel isolated or anything. But I think the reason I hate some of these reasons so much is because this like middle-aged man wrote this book thinking that he could quite possibly even one ounce of him could understand what would make a teenage girl do like end her life. And it just kind of comes across as like stupid and like, I don't know, very it a lot of the very early reasons are like stupid high school girl problems or whatever is how I interpreted them. And a lot of the reasons later on, like, yes, they should escalate because the book and things should get worse and worse or whatever for the character. And some of those make a lot more sense on like things that would really crush a human if these things happen to them. But some of these early reasons, just the way the author wrote them, definitely were like, it didn't sound like he did that much research on like what it's like to be a teenage girl, was my opinion on it. Hannah, for the first episode, what do you think about this as a series?
As a series, I feel like you're introduced to some of the story. The episode left you wanting to watch the second episode to just find out more, like what's going on. I think specifically you want to know how Clay is involved. I don't know what number he is, but like I already stated in the recap, he's not the first reason. It's Justin Foley. And I feel like what Justin did is, he's a piece of garbage trash, but it's like not unheard of. So what happens is Hannah and Justin kiss. It's her first kiss ever. She's going to be sliding down this slide and she's like, wait, I'm wearing a skirt. And then he takes a picture of her coming down the slide where I think you can see her underwear. And like the way her head is, it just like looks like she's like kind of moaning or something, or I don't know, posing, whatever you want to call it. And so actually one of his friends sends this picture around the school on his phone, on Justin's phone. And so everyone's receiving this text of Hannah and her underwear showing under her skirt, and in the tape you hear her saying, we just kissed, what else did you hear? And you see this flash of Clay watching them like have sex on this playground basically. And then she's like, no, all we did is just kiss. Like, I don't care what you heard, that is just what happened. And I'm a person who experienced rumors about me going around a school with like of the sexual nature. I heard some good ones about myself. And so I was like, okay, we have the same name. We both had that. I didn't have pictures sent around of me, but I do know what it's like to have that happen. So it's not unheard of. And how you said like certain issues might be like, oh, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. It's true. Some of these might not seem like a big deal, but also you don't know like what type of headspace she was in before. So someone could be like just in the worst headspace and then a leaf falls on them when they're walking home from work and they're like, okay, that's it. Like I literally need to end my life. That was the last straw. And it might seem so stupid to someone else, but to them in that moment, it is literally the reason. But I do think that we might get some inauthenticity from this man who wrote it because he's a middle-aged white man who has not gone through the life experience of a teenage girl.
Right. And what I'm saying is this person, so like Hannah said, everything could just like have been going wrong and then this one thing happened and is the camel or the straw that broke the camel's back, the camel that broke the straw's back. That's a heavy camel. But that's not like where the author seemed to have been going with it either. Like the intentions weren't like Hannah's life was already so terrible that these like smaller things really like escalated in the show. I know they say something in like the second or third episode about like a butterfly flaps its wings and it causes a hurricane thousands of miles away, like the butterfly effect, which I think the show maybe handles it a little bit better, but there wasn't really any butterfly effect here. It was like a smaller thing did like escalate to a bigger thing, but she like attributes everything that was bad that happened to her to like the Justin Foley thing first, and then the next thing happened, then the next thing happened, then the next thing happened, and so on and so forth. Which all I've got to say there is that one person's actions does not inherently cause another person to do something. Each person is responsible for their own actions. So even if so in one of the episodes, Alex Standall writes Hannah Baker's name under best ass. That itself, Alex writing those words down, does not make other people grab Hannah's ass and sexually assault her. Those people I feel like would already have done that, especially Bryce Walker, who, as we will find out, and especially if you've seen the show or read the book, is an absolute piece of trash. So that's something that I kind of had problems with. Was, yes, sometimes it feels like it opens the door for other people, but that person was not forced to do that because Alex did this thing. Or, you know, Hannah taking her life, it might have been influenced by a lot of the bad things that happened to her, but she definitely had mental illness, which was affecting her response to a lot of these things. And inherently, like, it wasn't all of these people's faults, which is a lot of the problem that I have with this show and with this book, is that Hannah is putting blame on other people instead of on herself. While I do know, though, that she was not in a good place when she made these tapes. She, in the show, had just recently gone through a very, very traumatic event, and it led to her wanting to make the tapes, and she's like, this is the last straw. Like, this was it. I'm making the tapes, and I'm gonna do this to myself and stuff like that. So, like, there can be straws that break the camel's backs for sure, but I do have a problem with placing blame on other people for why you did a thing, whether that's taking your life, grabbing someone's ass, like cheating on a test. Like, you make your own decisions, and that is just something that I believe in. I don't know if Hannah has another take on that or not.
Yeah, I don't believe in playing this whole blame game. I mean, sometimes, we can get caught up in that and say like, "Oh, it's because of you" or whatever, but no, your actions are because of you, and just because someone does something doesn't mean you have to react a certain way. It is all on you how you react to something. It is all on you. Of course, a situation can be hard and you don't want to, but like even these people doing these things to Hannah is not the reason she took her life. They could influence her or whatever, but that is still not the whole thing. It's hard to say. And like people are like, oh, well, bullying causes people to commit suicide, which it does influence it, but like that person saying that thing to you is not actually killing you, you know? That's not me trying to be like, oh, well, this person really just wanted to take their life and they used bullying as an excuse. I don't know how to say that without sounding like I'm brushing off the fact of bullying or people doing things like, yes, it can affect you and it can hurt you, but you are also still responsible for how you react to things and what you do in life.
I completely agree with that. And just know that we aren't like exactly like what Hannah just said. We aren't like bullying has no effect on a human at all. Words do hurt. The whole sticks and stones bull crap, that's bull crap. Words do hurt people, actions hurt people, rumors hurt people. Like, things that you didn't even know you were doing could hurt somebody. But everyone needs to realize that their actions are their own. And yes, mental illness could affect how she perceives these things, or how it affects her personally, and it could have a say on her reaction to it, on why she decided then to take her life and things like that. But all these people, like, the blame game and like making it their fault, she was a victim of bullying. She was a victim of sexual assault. She was a victim of all these things. She also is a victim of her own suicide of herself, you know, and she's trying to make it seem like she has no responsibility in this situation so that this very, very tragic and like life-ending thing that she did would not be her fault. She feels like, and you know what? Like, I totally understand she thinks it's other people's fault because that's her perspective, that's her life and everything like that. But all these people really, like, that should have been one of the things that they taught when they were going through all of these like therapy sessions and stuff like that about suicide, because in the show they have, you know, counselors coming in and talking about what are the signs of, you know, depression or, you know, suicidal thoughts or things like that. What are the signs of that? They also should make sure to have said, you know, it isn't anyone's fault. We do need to take a look at bullying and make sure that we aren't targeting people and being absolute dickheads to other people, because like, what good is that going to do for you? Like, why is it fun to make other people feel like crap? It shouldn't be. And that itself is its own issue. But they like don't talk about how it's Hannah Baker's fault that she took her own life. You know, like that's never even considered, I feel like, in the whole show. And everyone just accepts that, like, we all did this to Hannah, you know? Interesting. And then even like the show, I thought would take a different route with it than the book because, you know, Selena Gomez was very into it. She was one of the executive producers and she has a very strong relationship with mental health and how, you know, we should be portraying it accurately in TV and in media and showing the effects of it honestly and things like that. And then like still supports the show. Like, why not just write your own show portraying it in a way that you believe it should be portrayed and whatnot?
Well, and, like, of course, they do have some part in it, but they aren't the reason. And mental health is very interesting and unique. And for one person, these things could affect them, and for another person, they wouldn't affect them at all. And just to be like completely transparent, I'm a person that suffered with mental health issues since I was like born, basically since I exited the womb. They've been there. Um, and I'm a person who has had many different forms of treatment and someone who's contemplated suicide. I wrote that note. I've been there, I've done that, and certain actions from people, like I said, they could affect me and not someone else. And it's weird though, because in that moment, like maybe in that moment, it's like everything around her, she is blaming these people. For me, when I was getting bullied, I didn't see it as like, oh, this would be their fault for my reason taking my life. It was that it would be like, it was just too much for me to take. It wasn't like I was blaming them. I was just like I just don't want to live this anymore, and I'm worthless and I don't deserve to be living. Like, I'm just a burden on everyone's life. And that's where my perspective came from. And so I don't know if they okay, so Jay Asher's the author of the book, and he says that it's not true, but it is based on things that happened in his life. Two things that happened in his life that he was basing this on, it was one, he knew he wanted to write a book that was about tapes happening because he went on a museum tour and he got the idea for this tape movie because there's a self-guided tape thing, and he's like, oh, this would be a fun idea for a book. And at some point in his life, he had someone in his life who attempted suicide during her junior year of high school. And so he kind of like mushed those two ideas together and used it for a book. And so maybe he talked to her, and that is exactly how it played out for her, even though it's like based on things and it didn't actually happen. Or maybe he just created this whole narrative by himself. And so I don't know if that'd be like authentic for someone else, and like they completely blame someone else. I don't know. I just can't get in someone else's head, so I don't know. But does that even make sense? I feel like I just went on a whole tangent, but
I think you did a good job. So I think right now would probably be a good place for me to go through these reasons real quick. I'll do the book ones and then I'll do the TV show reasons, just the first season, obviously. And if you don't want to hear what these reasons are, like, you can cut out now and skip ahead. I'm not going to put the timestamp because I am not that good at editing. So just skip ahead for a little bit because we'll be talking about them. So first things first, the tapes are in a different order in the book and in the show. So that's one major difference that I kind of noticed. I wasn't 100% sure of it, but I thought that they might have been in a different order. So it's still Justin first in the book. And they kissed, they dated for about a month. They did nothing more, but rumors spread and circulated that he had felt her up and did other stuff and created this reputation for Hannah, is how it is played out in the book. Then we also get a little foreshadow that he is somewhere else in the tapes as well. This isn't his only tape. He has 2, which if I was Justin, I'd crap my pants, honestly, because that sounds terrifying. Then Alex Standall is number 2 in the book. He kind of like made this hot or not list where there was like the best lips, the worst lips, you know, best eyes, worst eyes. One of them was best ass and like worst ass or something. And Hannah Baker was written under best ass, and he did it as a cruel joke to get back at Jessica because I believe they were dating in the book as well. They're dating in the show, but he did it to get back at Jessica by not putting her on the hot ass list. And Hannah looked at this as an excuse for people to, like, grabbing her ass in public and whatnot, and gave them the right to touch her and commit sexual assault on her, basically. Then tape 3 is Jessica. She believed the rumors that Alex and Hannah like had a thing or did something together and blamed Hannah for the reasons that she and Alex broke up. So yes, they were dating. She confronts Hannah, and when Hannah said, you know, Hannah literally said, "You can blame me for this, you know, if it makes you feel better, but like, just know that none of this happened." You know, Jessica gets really mad, I think probably because she realizes that what Hannah's saying is true. She like hits Hannah and leaves a scar. Tape 4 is Tyler. He was stalking Hannah. He's the photographer for the yearbook and follows her around, even follows her outside her house and takes pictures through her window of her. And this, you know, terrifies Hannah and, you know, made her feel unsafe in her own home and whatnot. Then tape 5 is Courtney, who is another girl at her school. She used Hannah to gain more positive points because like she was like this popular, like all sweet, all nice girl, and like she had to be nice to everybody. And so she used Hannah to like, look, I'm even nice to the girl with the reputation, basically. And, you know, invited Hannah to this party, used Hannah kind of like to get a ride to the party, basically, and then ditched her at the party the second they got there. And so that happened, which that does not happen at all in the show. Tape 6 is Marcus. He's one of the jocks. There was this $1 Valentine survey where like you could match up with people, and it was like a cheerleading fundraiser. Hannah and him matched as like the number 1. He asked her out and then was like an hour late to the date. When he showed up, he had his friends with him, but they sat at a different booth. He tries to feel Hannah up. She like pushes him out of the booth, and he calls her a tease in front of everyone and leaves. So that was one thing. Then tape 7 is Zach, who is another jock, friends with Marcus. He got teased at this restaurant because Hannah would not go on a date with him. So there was this thing in a different class where they had these baskets and you could write notes to people, like nice things to each other anonymously. And so to get back at Hannah, he stole all of her good notes. She like caught him doing it, flipped out in the hall being like, "Why are you doing this?" So she then put a note so that you also could like, she put a note to talk about suicide in the bag, and Zach read it and did nothing to help, I guess. Then Ryan was like, he's the editor of this secret underground newspaper. He stole a poem. They were in this poetry club together, stole one of her poems after like they opened up to each other about their stuff, shared it with the whole school, and everyone like critiqued it really negatively. Clay basically did nothing. Like, I literally have no idea what he did. I just wrote basically did nothing and was a good guy. So I don't know why he's on the tapes in the book. In the show, they explain it. Tape 10 is Justin again, and he was dating Jessica at the time. And while Hannah was like locked in this closet at this party, like she went in there to like sulk, and then Jessica and Justin went in there, so she hid in the closet and couldn't leave. And then Bryce came in, and Justin didn't stop Bryce from doing very terrible things to Jessica while she was passed out, drunk, and couldn't say no. Then tape 11 is a girl named Jenny Kurtz, who is a really popular cheerleader, but actually liked Hannah, and she gives Hannah a ride home from the party that all this happened at, or like the last thing happened at. And Jenny crashes into a stop sign, and the stop sign falls down. Jenny doesn't want to report it because she doesn't want to get in trouble, and basically we find out later that that night there was another crash at that area, presumably because there was no stop sign, and someone got severely hurt. Tape 12 is Bryce Walker, who has been an asshole this whole time. Like we just said in tape 10, was that he raped Jessica. Well, he does the same thing to Hannah. Hannah's not drunk and passed out, but still like says no, doesn't want it, and it happens. Then tape 13 is Mr. Porter, who is the school counselor. And Hannah basically records her counseling session with him. This was after she already made all the tapes and she was considering passing them out, but she's like, I'm going to give myself one more chance, give somebody one more chance to hear me out. And she goes to the counseling session with Mr. Porter, basically tells him what happened with Bryce. Not that it was with Bryce, but like says what happened. And he like asks questions to try and get it out of her, like what happened. And basically comes to the conclusion that Hannah probably just regretted what happened instead of it being sexual assault. And kind of, without saying it, tells Hannah to get over it. And Hannah like leaves crying, and he tries to stop her, but like not that much. And so that was like her final straw in the book. So I'll just quickly try and go through the show, what happened, and what changed. Tape 1 was Justin. He actually, pictures were sent around, as we said. That was a difference. Tape 2 is Jessica. She and Alex date behind Hannah's back. The three of them were really close friends, Hannah, Jessica, and Alex. And then when Jessica and Alex start dating, they like distance themselves from Hannah, and so she like kind of loses her friends. Then the list comes out, and Jess is mad at Hannah for it for whatever reason. She thinks that Hannah and Alex like hooked up, and so for some reason she's mad at Hannah instead of Alex for cheating on her or whatever. So even though it never happened, and slaps Hannah. Tape 3 is Alex. He is blamed for Hannah getting ass grabs and the end of her and Jessica's friendship. Tyler's third, still the stalker, but when Hannah like denies like hanging out with him, he like spreads one of the pictures around. And actually there's a difference in this one, is that Courtney and Hannah were hanging out and trying to trap Tyler and catch who the stalker was, and they end up like getting drunk and like playing truth or dare. They end up like kissing and things like that, and then Tyler spreads the picture of them kissing around, and no one knows it's Hannah and Courtney, luckily for them. Like that's good. But tape 5 is Courtney, and she's very embarrassed about the photo because she knows it's her, and she spreads a rumor that it's Hannah and some random girl named Lauren or Laura or something, and says like, oh yeah, starts spreading these rumors about it, and says like, oh yeah, she tried to get me to be in a threesome with them. So basically just making Hannah more of a like ostracized at this place. 6 is Marcus, same exact thing that happens in the book. 7 is Zach, same thing, except she doesn't like write a note about suicide. She writes a note like saying how much she needed these positive things because she's going through a really hard time right now. And she apparently watches him read it and throws it away, but he didn't actually throw it away. He kept it. He must have thrown something else away. 8 is Ryan. And in the show, I just want to say this now, the actor that plays Ryan recently came out as a trans woman. So when I talk about Ryan, I will say he, because in the show Ryan is a guy. But if I ever talk about the actor, I will say she. So I don't really see how that will come up, but I just want to be transparent about that. But Ryan secretly publishes Hannah's poem. Everyone mocks it. Kind of the same thing. Tape 9 is Sherry, who takes place of Jenny. I don't know why they changed the name, but they did. And Jenny drives Hannah home, crashes into the stop sign, etc. But instead of like this random old man that like gets hurt, it's a character that we see throughout the first couple of episodes. This guy Jeff, he ends up dead because the sign is crashed, which I think is a better change. Not like good, someone died, but like it gives higher stakes to the situation. 10 is Justin again, same thing. That happened in the book. Then 11 is Clay. Like he's near the end. There's only 2 people after him. And literally she just made this tape to apologize to Clay for like what happened at the party. Like they hooked up, but she like pushed him away and like ran off. She's just having a really hard time, having a really bad day, really bad life, like these last couple of months. And like denied him. So basically it was literally just a freaking apology to Clay so that he would know, and that pisses me off. But okay, like Clay can do things wrong. He's not perfect, but that's okay. Then it's Bryce, same thing as before. Mr. Porter, same thing as before. So those are the reasons, the different order and everything like that. So I don't know if you were not listening before and you're back. Here we are. Hannah, what are your opinions on any of this?
I would agree that I think the fact that in the series, someone actually dying from the no stop sign would be a good change because the stakes are higher. The Clay thing is interesting because why can't he do something wrong? He could have done something. He could have been the one that, like couldn't, instead of her, like flip the table.
Well, why doesn't she just say, like, you have been, like, they worked at this movie theater together, okay? So he's, like, known her since, like, basically she moved here. And probably, like, no one is responsible for, like, finding the signs and, like, reaching out and helping someone. Like, don't ever think, like, oh, I saw this, I should have done something. Like, no, I'm not trying to put blame on anybody here because the blame game, like we said, is not our thing. But she could have said something like, you have seen me the most. You should have sensed the changes and done something. Like that would have been a reason for this character to, like, that would have made sense to me, like in context of this book and this show. But it literally was just like, I'm sorry and I just want you to know why, I'm not here anymore or something. Like that just sounds stupid to me. Like, I'm sorry. I think there should have, if everyone else gets a reason, Clay should have a reason too if he's on these tapes.
Or like she could have been like upset that he never asked her like, how are you doing? Things like that. I feel like that'd be fitting for her character too, to be like, oh, well, it's your fault because you didn't ask me. Like, it's not my fault that I didn't tell you I wasn't doing okay. I think that could have been something they definitely could have done. A fun fact, I guess, or I don't know if it's a fun fact, but so filming this series obviously would be super challenging and difficult, emotional, because I think something that people forget is when people are acting, like you have to put yourself in those positions. You have to feel those emotions. And so like sometimes there's child actors who just like develop so much trauma because they're making themselves get into these scenarios of having to feel these emotions as if they're actually happening in your life. And so, I mean, they're not child actors on this series, but they had to have therapy dogs come to set because it was so hard to shoot. And they literally had to have therapy dogs there to help because it's just like such a harsh environment to be working in.
Well, and it goes for 4 seasons with, I think, like all of the same actors. Like all the main cast pretty much is the same throughout the show. And a lot, like they're like Clay especially goes through like such intense emotions throughout the show, like from being this like subdued, like very anxious kid to like freaking out and like letting it all out, finally having a breakdown in front of like the whole school and stuff. Like that will have a big toll on somebody. I know that in Dear Evan Hansen, the musical, Ben Platt, literally because he had to embody that character so much, had to go to a chiropractor because he was like developing like back pain and stuff from like all the anxiety and like the way he had to like hold his body to like embody that character. So like it, acting has a physical toll on people as well as emotional toll. So I think that's very good that they brought in people. And I know they had like drug specialists, like, because in a later season, I think Justin, or maybe it's even in this season, Justin develops like a drug problem. So they had somebody who like actually like went through that in high school and stuff come in and like make sure that was pretty accurate. Like they took a lot of the right steps. And what bothers me is that they didn't take the right steps where it mattered. And so here's one very specific part. So again, if you could make it this far talking about it, I am going to briefly just talk. I'm not going to go in depth about it, but I'm going to briefly talk about the suicide scene in the show. So if you do not want to talk about that, like please leave. And so in the book, Hannah just takes pills, which is still terrible. But it's not graphic, it's not anything, it's not romantic, it's not anything in the scene. Like she takes pills and that is what ends her life. In the effing show, that wasn't good enough for them. They needed something a little more cinematic. They needed something a little more visible. And so they decide that they're going to do a cutting scene in a bathtub, and that's going to be it. And her mother comes in, and it's very tragic. It's like awful to watch. It's so hard. You don't need to show it. I don't know why they needed to show it. It makes no sense. We know what happened. We know the protocols. We know how everyone's reacting. They're all having a very difficult time dealing with it. Her mom in the show is like the most wonderful actor. Like she is so freaking good at acting. She is like absolutely like demolished emotionally and physically and mentally because of her daughter's death. We don't need to see it at this point. Apparently 2 years after the show came out, they did remove the scene. I don't know what they do now because I didn't rewatch the whole first season. So one, you specifically changed it so that it would be more cinematically good on camera and stuff. That, why? When there was a specific way that it happened in the book and you changed it for a selfish reason. And then it took 2 years after, there was literally so much hate when the show came out or that it was about to come out. There's a ton of hate. And you didn't realize then to take it out or like not to show it. It took 2 years to get it removed. That was shocking to me. And they still show parts of like bad dreams that Clay has where she's standing there with her wrists and stuff, or like there's blood places, or there's like a visual of her in the tub. We don't really see what happened, but I have not gotten to an episode where they would have shown that scene. So I mean, I'm glad they finally took it out, but like it was, I'm glad that I was not somebody who struggled with suicidal thoughts, because I don't know like how I would have perceived watching that episode. Like it was brutal.
I guess from my perspective of being someone who has had suicidal thoughts, I don't think I saw it as brutal as maybe you saw it because you've seen yourself in these situations, you've pictured yourself this way, and maybe they do it to show like what it would be like for the person walking in on it versus the person who's done it. Um, because sometimes like that might be the reason you don't take your life, is because you do hear stories like, oh, I was going to, but then I didn't want to upset my mom, or I didn't want my dog to find me like that, things like that. So I don't know if they did it for that reason and that aspect, but obviously that could be a huge trigger for certain people too. And then maybe they're like, oh, well, she did it and it's like that, like, who cares, it's not that bad, let me just do it too. I don't know. It's very, I can see both sides to that. But for me, I remember it being like, oh, wow, like this is intense, but it wasn't like I had never dreamed up a scenario like that before, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. I'm just of the mind of like now, like I feel like I've grown a lot in the last couple years where like you do not need to show certain things on camera to get the point. And especially like being in film school when I was like I just graduated, like go me. Uh, but like when I was there, like there were some of these film students, and it was mostly film students, not so much the writing students. Film students would like put in all these brutal scenes, whether it was a sexual assault scene, whether it was a torture scene or something. And it's like they got off on like having it on camera and potentially shooting it and like putting it on like the big screen or something. And it's just like you don't need it to get the point across. Like you should be able to write either people's responses to it or whatever, like make it without it, and it should still be just as powerful. Because I don't think a lot of the time it's like a shock factor. It's like, oh, let's see how much I can shock the audience. That's like Quentin Tarantino's whole thing, and it ticks me off. Like, he does not need to be the way he is with the stuff in his films. So that is like my big thing. I actually don't like it. Still was so tragic. I don't mind so much if it was just the mom walking in and like from behind Hannah, like we don't see even her face or anything. Like we just see like maybe the back of her head in the tub and maybe the water or whatever. And we see her mom walk in and just like that response. I agree that could be a very strong thing and a very strong reason why someone doesn't do it. So while I do think that it is not a good thing to find reasons to blame people for why you would commit suicide, I do think if you are having suicidal thoughts, it's very good to look for reasons to stay alive. Make a list of reasons to stay alive rather than tapes blaming everybody. Again, Hannah was not in a good mental state when she made these tapes. In the show, it was right after the Bryce Walker incident with her. So I can understand why she would want to just put all of these bad things on somebody. I can understand that. But the fact that like the book and the show doesn't always see it that way, like they just like accept the blame and stuff like that and don't really talk about the problems, is bad. Like Marcus in the show is like, we don't, why do we listen to these tapes? Like it's not our fault. Like this is stupid. Like she's dead now. Like why are we entertaining this? This is not a good idea, and we're just making ourselves feel worse. I agreed with him, and he's supposed to be a bad guy. Like he's right, I feel like. But the thing that we didn't say is that Hannah made a second set of tapes and she gave it to somebody who will release them if they don't go through the whole list. So everyone will hear them, supposedly, if, you know, we skip over someone or you don't listen to it or you don't pass it on to somebody, which is very manipulative. That's very manipulative of somebody to do. And another criticism that I have, and the show is very weird about it, and like Tony is one of Clay's friends and he has the second set of tapes, and he's being very creepy about it with Clay and like making sure Clay listens to all of them. And it's like, why would you want your friend to do this?
Yeah, it's weird and it's heavy, and it's definitely not going to be a series that everyone should watch, which is like I don't know if I would recommend it or if I wouldn't. I do think that's interesting, and maybe there's some good life lessons in there. I'm not sure, but it's definitely not for everyone. And it's dark and twisty and things happen, and like we had to have a huge trigger warning at the beginning of this. Like it's not something to be taken lightly, and there's very serious heavy topics that can be definitely uh they deteriorate your mental health if you watch it. If you're someone who struggles with mental health issues, and I'm not saying you will necessarily be triggered by it if you have mental health issues, but don't just watch this as like an easy breezy light show, you know. You have to be prepared for what you're going to be watching if you choose to watch this, and only watch it if you truly think that you're going to be okay watching it.
I have a question for you, Hannah. So in the book, there was an alternate ending where Hannah was actually alive. She had tried to take the pills, it didn't work. They got to the doctor in time and everything worked out, but the tape still went around. And then they show up to school, and after so long, and she's like in class, like she's back or whatever. What do you think about that? Like the tape still exists, people go through it, and then she ends up being alive. Like what do you think that would be as a message? Do you think that's a good alternative? Do you think that's a terrible? What do you think?
I like that alternative because I like the fact, and then they could like dive into the story of what her thoughts are now after she attempted suicide and she didn't succeed, I suppose you would say. Does she regret that she did it? Like, does she view things way differently? But maybe the reason they didn't do that is because then you might get in this area where people are watching it and they're like, oh, she attempted and she didn't succeed, or like, I'm gonna be better than that, I'm gonna succeed. Or maybe they think, oh, if I try it, like maybe I'll get some attention, but I won't die, and then they do die. I don't know. That's another thing where I can see it from both points of view. But personally, I think I would like to see this story where she attempted, she didn't succeed, and then the reasons why she wished she never would have done it, the reasons why she wished she would have asked for help, and just like how her life changed. And maybe it affects these other people in such a way where they're like, whoa, like she tried, and like I really could have been a reason why she was just feeling so terribly, and maybe I should check myself. And maybe they would have gone that way with the series instead of like all the other things you said are like wild and crazy about the other seasons. What's your thoughts on that?
I agree on a lot of the stuff you just said. They already, I think, like romanticize and fantasize the idea of like suicide in this show, for one, by like having her live on through these tapes and like, oh, well, if I do that, like the whole school will go through them and like I'll be the center of attention and people will be forced to look at whatever. Like, that's not good because you do not live on after you die. You are dead. There isn't a way to come back. You can't watch them go through the tapes. You can't make sure anything happens. Like, you are gone and people will mourn your death. That is it. That will happen. And that is it. It is a final decision. And you do not get a show made after you if you do this. And so if she had like gone through it and then survived at the end, like wouldn't that just like it could romanticize even more, like it's a potential option, but it didn't work. Look, she's still here, like everything's fine. That whole like book you just read wasn't even a problem because she's not dead. Look, she's fine. I could see that too. And so I think that I'm glad they didn't go with that ending because it makes it all seem like it was fake and a fantasy and like it didn't really happen. But like all these people still got those 13 tapes of like why she was going to like commit suicide and stuff like that. So like I couldn't even imagine like surviving through that and then like knowing that. I don't know if these people would just bully her more, for like doing this. Like, oh, how could you put us through this? You're a terrible person. Like, I could see that happening too, rather than like, oh, also, or you might get them babying you, like, oh, Hannah, like, I'm so sorry that we were so mean to you. Like, that's not going to help you. You want real friends, you know? And so I'm glad that they didn't do it, but also the show probably would have gone in a much different way and been much better. In the book, like Clay gets the tapes and he goes through them all in one night, whereas in the show he goes through them like in weeks. Like it takes forever. But he goes through them all in a day. But like in both the show and the book, it's been like a week since she's died. Like when he gets the tapes in both situations. In the show, he's the 11th person. How did 11 people go through the tapes in 1 week? I don't understand that. Especially one of them said they went through the tapes twice. Like, I don't get it. And then in the book, they like they mailed them to each other. That's going to take a couple days to get to each person. And if Clay's like 9th or whatever, how did he get them within a week of her death if he is not number 2? So that didn't make sense. In the show, they're like trying to protect Bryce. he's right after Clay, and they're like, we're gonna stop the tapes after Clay. They end with Clay. We're gonna make sure. And like, you can tell everyone else in the show like must have listened to them, so you're wondering where Clay is. Like, okay, he's definitely after Courtney, he's after Zach, he's after Marcus, but where is he? You know, Bryce obviously hasn't listened to them. Like, we can tell because he has no idea what the heck, why they're all acting weird and why Jess is being weird and all this stuff. Why do they want to protect Bryce? Like, what do they think Bryce is gonna do? I literally have zero idea. He like has done the worst things to people in this, where like I don't understand why they want to protect him. People are so loyal to him, and it's kind of disgusting, and it perpetuates the whole like boys will be boys, or like be loyal to your boys even if they commit sexual assault or something. I'm like, no, that's not being a good friend, especially if you're about to like still date that girl that you let him do this terrible thing to and didn't stop him. What's going on? So that's another thing I hated about the show.
That's messed up. Truly messed up. I don't know. And that the point about it only being a week and the tapes getting to him, that's a good point too. Very, very interesting. How does that work? Your timeline seems a little off. Honestly, though, I think that is all that I have to say. I think if people want to learn more about this, do your research or watch it, like I said, only if you can. But I think that's all. And sorry, guys, if this was such a heavy, hard-hitting show. Next week will be a lighter topic. Next week, we will be watching and talking about the book Let It Snow.
Yep, by John Green, which is...
And 2 other authors. I can't remember.
Yeah,
it's a book written by 3 authors. We'll discuss that next week.
Let me just say, I got opinions.
Do you want to run through our socials? I just realized in our last podcast we did not do that. We recorded a different one earlier this morning, people. And so when you listen to Because of Winn-Dixie, here's a preview of, now we know that didn't happen.
It's not even a preview. It's a like, oh, you listened last week and now you know that never happened.
True.
We're the worst. Okay, here we go. If you want to email us about anything, well, pretty much anything, email us at youtalkintomepodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram at youtalkintome.podcast. And I believe we just had one of our lives just happen yesterday. So if you like those and want to keep watching them, follow us there because that's where they all are, okay? Follow us on Twitter at youtalkintome11 because we're both #1. And follow us on the YouTube, subscribe to our channel, like our videos, hit the notification bell if you want notifications about every time we post. We are on video, people. Come look at our faces. Last week's video has a very adorable picture of Hannah when they were a child, so keep it up, okay? Go watch them. It's worth your time. And that is it for our social media, I believe.
I think so too. But with that is our episode this week. Thanks again for listening or watching. My name is Hannah.
And I'm Rachel.
And this is the You Talking to Me podcast. Bye.
Bye.